Right,
they forget.
got it. I'm gonna step away for 5 seconds.
Okay,
Right back.
that should do that. Rachel, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. Yeah, I don't have COVID.
I
so-
loved what you were saying. You guys were just talking about as of right now.
Yeah,
things are good.
yeah. It's just
Challenges have been popping up all over the place today, though.
yeah. Well, and we've been talking about, the faculty have been talking about, the spring semester calendar has been up for a while. And yet it was the one approved last December. And I guess Ochi just came out last week telling everybody they can't do spring break. And so here on campus, that has not been officially announced. I'm just letting it fly because it's not a secret. And when I was talking to somebody today, they're like, oh yeah, some faculty mentioned, well, couldn't we, instead of canceling spring break and ending a week early, couldn't we just spread out those days? And I'm like, no, like what faculty said that? That's a terrible idea. I'd much rather just end a week early, So
All a challenge.
I know. It's like, who gets a say in this stuff? We never know. Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and as people join, we'll just bring them in. So I had 2 guest speakers lined up. My elementary teacher that was going to talk about her classroom management, which I wish you all could meet her because she is just phenomenal. Texted me like 10 minutes ago that they had a teacher quit today and another teacher got tested positive for COVID. So they're in an emergency meeting trying to figure out what to do, like as of tomorrow. So she's not going to be able to join us. But the good news is that I have taught elementary for quite a time. And so I will be your elementary kind of person talking about classroom management. And we also have with us Bridget Paddock, who is a high school teacher here in the district. And so I absolutely love her approach to classroom management. We're like kindred spirits we found in the past when we got together. So I'm really excited that she's joined us. So I'm going to have Bridget kind of take over. She'll just kind of share a little bit of her philosophy. I did put a handout in an announcement on D2L. I'll go ahead and put these handouts in the chat here as well, so that if you didn't get them there, it'll just be easy for you to get them here. So one of the handouts is one that Bridget created for what she's going to be talking about. The other one is one that I created. And the one I created is not just for elementary. It really has some resources for all levels on that. So let me get that and attach it here. And Bridget, you could go ahead and get started.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So I just got done teaching from 6:30 to 3 because I don't know if you know what the high schools are doing in the school district, but we're doing an alternating week block schedule, which means that on our A weeks, I have my morning classes and I teach an early morning class, and that class happens every day, every week. And then we teach 1, 2, and 3. And because of when my prep is, which is 4th, my A week is long.
Oh.
So I have no break from 7 in the morning when my class starts to 3 o'clock when my other class gets over. It's fun, but that's a new COVID thing. So as Melanie said, I am a high school teacher. I teach AP, right now I teach AP Lang and college public speaking at Skyview High School. And I am in my 11th year of teaching. Yeah, which feels both like nothing and everything. Yeah. And yeah, I'm gonna go through some stuff with you, but please ask me questions if you have questions or if you need stuff clarified. I guess.
Did you want to share your screen at all, Bridget? You can.
I can open that up, but it's all just bullet points anyway. So
okay, that's fine. I just wanted to let you know you could if you wanted to.
You humans are just gonna listen to me talk for a minute. or 5-ish. I have no idea. We'll find out. Things are interesting. So I added a bullet point this year into the handout about like digital considerations and COVID considerations, because that's also changed some things. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say, and I think Melanie would agree with me, that classroom management at kindergarten and classroom management at 11th and 12th grade, which is where I am, have similar foundations. And there are small things, I believe, that change based on age and maturity level. But my seniors are just bigger kindergartners. Maybe even more special because they're seniors and they think that that's a big deal. And they also think that they're ready to leave and be gone. So they're fun in a whole larger way. And I would say that for classroom management, at its simplest, it's important to remember that the people we're dealing with are human beings. And we should treat them as the human beings that they are. And if you do that and see them as people and treat them as people, you're gonna skip a whole bunch of other stuff that you then don't have to deal with. Like writing kids up and having them talk back and having them do weird things. Not that that never happens in my class, but I would say that it's very minimal in my class because we start out by building trust. We start out by having open conversations about expectations for behavior, and I learn about them. Sometimes I think too often teachers or students feel as though teachers just see them as students that they need to talk at instead of seeing them as these humans who have interests and desires and fears and all of these things happening outside of our classrooms. So my biggest thing is to build a relationship with them. And that is both a giant thing to do and a really simple thing to do. So it's nothing really big and mind-blowing and earth-shattering that I'm doing. There are little things that you can do that do that. So even though it looks different, literally, because I have a mask on all day long when I'm teaching, even though it looks different this year, I meet my classes at the door at whenever possible. Like there are some times where that just doesn't work. And I try to engage each one as they come in. It's not always lengthy. Sometimes it is, because you can usually see on a kid's face if something's going on or if they have a question. But just saying, hi, how are you today, Melanie? Or I don't know the rest of you, but you have your names on there. Hi, Tina. Oh, and Taylor's chatting something about me, so that's good. Thanks, Taylor. I did not have you. And I think that is way bigger than it sounds to actually like meet them and learn their, and just by the way, this year learning names was extra challenging because you can't see their faces. And there's also, and we can talk about this later, some other really interesting observations about what you lose with a mask. So learning their names this year, a little extra hard, but I try to know their names by the end of the first week. Because that's a big deal. Like what people call you is a gigantic thing. And one of my earliest mentors gave me this advice, and it's stuck with me for 14 years or so. She said, you might be the only person all day long, and that's in school and out of school, who says hi to one of those students and says their name. And if you think about what that implies and what that feels like to go through an entire day and no one ever says, hi, Bridget, or no one's, a lot of people say, hi, Miss Paddock at school, but to not ever have anyone engage with you in actual human contact, and that's also something then that we lost last spring, is massive and terrible and just dehumanizing, really at its most basic. So that's those are two of the things. I learn their names. Part of learning their names, I meet them at the door. I try to start learning. I don't need to know everything about them. Like, that's the other thing. I can be engaged with them and have discussions with them and learn about them, and we are not best friends. That's a line that can be easy to cross with high school, especially seniors and juniors. They're really fun because they're turning into these really connected, invested adults. But you can engage in all those conversations with them and still not be their best friend. So I learn about them. I do also have expectations though, and if they're not meeting expectations, I'm not going to write. I don't almost ever write anyone up and send them to the office. And my rationale for that is that as soon as I send you out of the room, one, I don't know if that's my feedback or yours. I have lost their trust and they're losing instructional time. And those are both things that I don't want to happen. A kid who trusts you is going to do a lot of things for you. One, they're going to try. And whatever subject you're going to teach and whatever grade you're going to teach, learning is really, for a lot of kids, really scary. So if you can get your students to trust you, they're going to try some like crazy thing that you're asking them to do that maybe is just like, we're trying to read Frederick Douglass right now. I need you to just try that. They're going to be more willing to do that. And then they're also going to call each other out on their behavior. So I have found, for better or for worse, that once you build allies with your students, they police each other way better than I police them anyway. Even to the point, like, I didn't have a kid with a mask on one day. And it was the end of the day on one of these weeks. So I, to really be honest, had no idea because I just didn't notice. But they were like, Miss Paddock. I was like, okay. Oh, what's wrong with his face? Oh, he doesn't have a mask on. And that was way simpler. I try to model positive behavior. So kids are still learning, even as 17 and 18-year-olds, how do you properly respond to another human being when they ask you a question or when they challenge you? And the best way is not through anger, in my opinion, at least, not through anger, not through yelling. It's asking them about what they mean, or it's going to really depend on the context. I have a really interesting student right now, and he's in 2 of my classes in my A week. So we're together for 4 hours a day. I'm not really sure what's going on with him, but we're going to get there. He has moments of investment and moments where he wants to be a class clown. He is also labeled as ED, and I think he's come a long way, but he definitely struggles with what's appropriate and not appropriate. And if I just kick him out of class or punish him, I'm not going to get any. I think it would actually just go terribly wrong instead of us working to like where he wants to try for me. And he kind of wants, part of him does want to try for me already, but part of him's like, I want to be a 16, 17-year-old boy, and I'm having a hard time controlling all of my reactions to things. But that's a project. It's also an extra project this year because we are week on, week off. So tomorrow I will say goodbye to these classes for 10 days because it's a Friday and I won't see them again till the following Monday. And my students and I had a conversation about this. Well, we've been having conversations about how it's working, but it's really hard. So I've had them 4 weeks, this group of kids. To build classroom community and to get used to each other is extra challenging this year. And then we finally get back into a rhythm about Wednesday or Thursday, and you're really there Friday, and then you say goodbye again. And then you come back together on a Monday and you're like, oh gosh, how do we act in this class? So it's really disconnected and disjointed this year for me, at least, and from what my students have said. I'm going to stop right now because I don't want to talk this much in a row. And just does anybody have any questions?
Well, one thing I thought we would do is maybe I'll talk a little bit about elementary. And then I've got breakout rooms set up, and Zoom has a brand new feature that we're trying out tonight for the first time, where you all get to select the room that you go into. And so I've set up the breakout rooms to be one for K2, one for 3rd through 5th, one for 6th through 8th, and one for 9th through 12th. Some of you are getting like K-12 licenses for music, so you can just choose whichever you think you want to go into. So why don't I'll do a little spiel for elementary, similar to what Bridget just did. Then we'll break out into breakout rooms so that you can talk in your groups and maybe come up with some questions for both of us that we can then field when we come back from the breakout rooms. Sound good? Okay. So as Bridget said, I agree 100% on so much those foundational things. Building relationships with your students is just critical, no matter what grade level you teach. The way you do it and the kinds of things you do may look a little different depending on how old the kids are. So I love the idea of standing at the door and welcoming the students in, and a lot of elementary teachers do that as well. A lot of elementary teachers will do that all throughout the day. So when kids come in from recess, they're at the door greeting them coming in from recess, or if they're coming back from lunch or whatever it might be. I think that's really a great thing, because when you know, unlike high school, at elementary, you are generally kind of with your students all day long. Students can have a derailing experience at recess or lunch. And if you aren't, you know, if you're all busy getting prepared for what you're doing next and you're kind of not taking that moment to kind of check in with them and see where they're at, you might miss that a student is having some sort of difficulty based on, you know, an experience that they had. And often it just takes just less than a minute. You know, you notice a kid to just get down on their level and just go, hey, I notice you look upset. Did something happen at recess, or did something happen at lunch that you want to talk about? And often they just need to talk about something and kind of get it off their chest. And then they'll be okay, ready to learn and ready to go back to it. So I always think it's at the elementary level, constantly checking in with those students to see what's happening. So I love that. And similar how Bridget talked about building a classroom community, one of the biggest ways we do that in elementary is really establishing strong routines that they can rely on. They know that every time they come back from recess, we're going to hang our coats up here and we're going to find our spots on the carpet, or we're going to go to our tables, or whatever it is. Those kinds of routines create a corral of safety for those students, to where they know they can depend on that. So if other stuff in their life is going wacko and crazy, or they had an experience on the playground that was difficult, they know that those routines are built in. They know my teacher's going to check in on me, you know, and these different things. And those routines do not happen by themselves. They are very intentional. So for me, every year at the beginning of the year, that first month, my ultimate focus is building our classroom culture and our routines. Now in the elementary, what's nice is you can usually embed that within content. So when I'm teaching the language arts, I can read a story, right? Or we can role play a story that also has social emotional learning built within it, so that then we are using content and skill building at the same time that we have this very intentional focus on building our classroom culture. So I love the first month of school every year, because it is the time we really get to know each other. It's the time that we build who we are. For many years that I taught, I never had a year that was the same. And every year, some of our routines were a little bit different, because the kids would say, hey, why don't we do this, right? And they had input on that. And you want that kind of buy-in from your students when it comes to routines and expectations. And I would say that is another thing I always did was co-construct our expectations together. So every school that I've been at always had something like be respectful, be responsible, you know, those kind of just general expectations. So then every year in the first week, basically, we would have some sort of set of lessons where we are building what does that actually look like in our classroom. And every year that would look a little bit different, right? One of the things I want to say about that changed part way through my teaching was I learned about the power of stating everything in the positive and not the negative. And so instead of saying, you know, no running, right? You want to say, well, what do we actually want their bodies to do? Well, we want them to walk and be safe, you know? And so it's training yourself. And it really did take a couple years to kind of retrain myself. Something as simple as when I was teaching kindergarten, kids could get their own watercolor materials and take it to a table. They would use a tray. And I would often say, well, be careful, don't spill your water, you know, kind of a thing. And I had to retrain myself to say, like, hold the tray tight, right? So you're saying something positive that you want them to do. And there's some neat like brain research behind that your brain actually has to translate a negative command into a positive command. And so if you can say everything in the positive, then it's kind of like a direct connection there. So that was a really powerful change that I made partway through that I always like to share with folks. Okay, I made a little list here. Oh, this one is really important. Bridget kind of touched on it. It was like in not sending a kid just immediately out to, you know, the principal's office. So one of the things that I am just always asking myself is like just being genuinely curious about that child or that student and what's happening. Especially at the elementary level, it's rarely intentional, anything that they're doing that is non-compliant or causing an issue. There is usually something they need that they aren't getting one way or another. And my experience has been for some children, I can help find that need very quickly and we can kind of like get it taken care of and we're back on track. There are other students that I've spent almost the full year really trying to figure out what is it, right? Like what is behind this? But I'm never going to give up on that, right? I'm never going to give up on trying to figure out what is happening here that we can help support you. And sometimes it ends up being family support, right? Like sometimes we need to work together as a community with the family to help support them. But I think the most important thing here is that to never look at a student and think they're being bad on purpose to kind of get at you as the teacher, because you can feel like that at times because you've talked to maybe this same student several times about a behavior. And at some point in your heart of hearts, you're like, oh, come on, like we've talked about this, right? So if you just kind of, what I feel like it's more of a disposition than it is like a statement. Like I just hold in my heart that children actually want to do the right thing. Like they're actually good at the center of who they are. And that I can help them kind of figure that out by continuing to try. So I think holding that disposition is very critical to having a positive learning community in that. Okay. Yeah, I think that kind of covers the foundation, like Bridget said. There's a lot of techniques that a lot of us use. But I think at this point, it would be good to have you all go into breakout rooms, think about what Bridget and I have said. And I would like your groups to come up with a nice handful of questions for us. So, you know, maybe 3 to 5 questions that we can address. So I'm going to open the rooms. We'll see how this works. I think you should get something that pops up that tells you you can join whatever room you want to join. So hopefully this works. Here we go. Are you all getting a pop-up? No? Urgh. Well, okay, I guess I have to read more, but I can put you in a room. So Carolyn, what room would you like to go to? Let's see, is Carolyn still with us? Oh, she must have jumped out. Okay, well, I still have her here. Okay, Chris, where would you like to go? Oh, you're still muted. Oh, I still can't hear you. Weird. Okay, now try it. No? Oh, Carolyn's having audio issues as well. Okay.
Why don't you each chat what room you want to be in?
Oh, thank you, Bridget.
Yeah.
Way to pivot. Okay, so Taylor wants to be in 6 through 8. Thanks. Okay, perfect. Okay, there. Carolyn is K2. Okay. And Tina 912. And Kyle K12. Kyle 9 through 12. And Rachel 3 through 5. And got Kyle 912, and then Chiwa 3 through 5. Okay. Perfect. And Chantel K2. Sarah 912. And Chris. Chris, you put K12. Do you want to go to the high school 9 through 12? Still can't hear you. Sorry. No, just type it in the chat there. Do you want 9 through 12? Or do you want, yeah? Okay. And Chrissy, let's see, did I get one from Chrissy? Chrissy, you want to type in or say where you want to go?
3-5.
3-5, okay. Okay. Do you want to go and win, Bridget, or do you want to hang with me?
I can just hang out and then we'll
Okay.
see what they have to say.
Yeah, sounds good. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's
Yeah.
what we could have taught together. We would have
I
been
know.
just fine.
Oh, yeah, it's been a challenge. Just, oh, I have one not assigned. Oh, that's just you. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I'm not assigned.
Yeah,
I'm not
I have to figure out, like,
That's cool if you
it
could do
said-
that now.
it said students can select their own, though. So I got to figure out, I got to do some more
Maybe it's
searching
just
to see.
maybe it's a setting that you just need to change.
It probably
I don't know.
is. Yeah, it probably is. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, it's been crazy on my end too. So, this class only has 5 seminars that we meet with, and I give the students an option to meet in person or join virtual. And this semester, I only had 2 that were coming to the classroom. And because I wasn't feeling well, I just said, we're just going to all meet Zoom on this one. But I have 2 face-to-face classes that I had to do half online because we couldn't accommodate the whole class at the same time. So half the students come on Monday and the other half come on Wednesday. And I teach the same thing both days. And then I put the other half of whatever we're learning that week online. And then because I wasn't feeling well the last couple of weeks, I just said, I'm just putting everything online. And now I sent out a survey to them to say, like, okay, we're going to need to do, virtual or online. Tell me if you want synchronous or asynchronous. And 75% of them said they wanted synchronous, which kind of surprised me. But I'm glad for that because it's a little less crazy for me if I don't have to generate a bunch of content.
Well, it's a lot more work. Just, that's my dogs.
Oh.
I just surprised them. It's a lot more work. Even I took yesterday off just as
Hey,
a
Carolyn,
professional.
what room do you want to go into?
Sorry about that. I couldn't get my voice to happen.
Okay,
The K2, please.
the K2. Okay. There you go.
Yeah, so I took yesterday off and I was like, all right, let's figure out. And I told them that I was experimenting on them and
Yeah.
just made it all. I said, this is also a good test. We have more and more kids getting quarantined.
Yeah.
So I had like slides already, and then I added in audio talking about what was on them and giving them directions on each slide. And
Yeah.
but
And then
that
I'm
took-
sure for them, they have, because, so you have these block schedules, but they don't only have you, right? Or do they have
No,
other
so they have-
teachers?
they have three. If they don't have an early morning,
Okay.
an early morning is just like its own special like edition of craziness. If they just have a regular 6-period schedule, they have 3 classes a day, which that's nice. I like, and it's each of them's 2 hours. It's just
Okay.
the week on, week off is
Yeah. Yeah. It
for
does.
them too.
Yeah,
It's hard.
I'm sure. Yeah. Like, how do you keep track of all that? Well,
Oh,
and
how do you keep track of all that, especially if you have an AP Lang class 2nd
Mhm.
period, then
Yeah.
you have an AP Lang class 5th period. Those are at the same time of day.
Oh
They're
my-
just on different weeks. And if your classes are
Oh.
almost the exact same size,
oh shoot.
I had to
Oh.
So
Oh,
I have my lesson plans, and now in my lesson plan, like hard copy book, I am having to write down after every class actually what I got done.
yeah. Oh
Because
my
the first few
God.
weeks I was like, we did this. And
Right,
they were
right.
like-
They're like, no.
and I decided to tell them, I was like, I'm gonna mess up. Because obviously I just did, and I just either had you repeat something or
Right.
I just pretended like you did this because I was pretty sure
Yeah.
that we did
And
it
because
last
if
year.
you're doing that at the school and you have that morning, afternoon, there is this like temporal quality to you remembering, what you've done. Yeah. Yeah.
Like this.
Yeah. I can. Yeah. I used to, when I taught kindergarten for a while, I taught a morning and an afternoon session. We still had half day. And, sometimes it was like, did I do this? Which group did I do this with? Because like you said, every group is a little bit different. Sometimes, one group is way faster at stuff and, yeah.
Yeah, that's why my 2nd period is really good at discussion, which I will almost always just go with as long as it's a productive discussion.
Yeah.
But they've also, because of our 8 weeks, just because of our calendar, we haven't had a normal week. So the very first week, they didn't have a Monday. Then their 2nd week was Labor Day week.
Mm-hmm.
This week was ACT stuff.
Oh, gosh.
Like they had ACT on Tuesday. So we're behind my afternoon class. And then my early morning class is still a 55-minute block.
Oh, my goodness.
That meets every day, every week. So it's
Okay.
like a completely separate prep because that's
So are these are all in person though, or yeah, okay.
yeah. But now we have more, and I have at least, gosh, I bet I'm up to 5 as of today who were in close contact, so are now quarantined. So they're out of class they're out of school for 2 weeks from their quarantine day. So
And
they're
what
gonna
do you-
have to be all online.
Okay, so now you have to kind of generate online content and teach in person.
Yeah, and I've been posting all of it. I've been posting it all digitally anyway,
Okay.
just because it was this year.
Yeah.
So I was already doing that, and then I have a swivel, and I've been recording my classes when I have kids absent. So that's
How do you
fun.
like that? Our dean just ordered a bunch of them.
I
for us.
love my swivel.
Okay.
It's really cool, and I have a pro subscription right now, so I can
Mhm.
merge videos, and I can do it's
Nice.
and you can add slides in with them if you want to.
Oh wow, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's really, and it works. It's really easy. It just
Yeah.
pairs with, like, I have an iPad with mine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
no,
we're
it's
getting
cool.
them because we want to up when we have student teachers, we want to have an additional person doing an observation connected with their teacher work sample.
Yeah,
So
well, it'd
we'll
be
have
really
an on,
handy for them to have to watch it too.
right, and that way they can do some self-reflection.
I try not to watch mine because I'm like, yeah, I just said that and that was on, that's recorded and a student is gonna watch that. Like,
Oh, well.
sometimes I'm just like, Lana, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm gonna jump
just said that.
into one of these groups just to check and see if they're about ready. So hold on just a minute. Let's see. Oh, maybe I can't do that now. I used to be able to join a group.
You should be able to
Okay,
still.
wait. Oh, there it is. I hover over it and then it says, okay, let me join this group.
We're 115 this year, K-12. So we have up a little bit this year for enrollment.
Hey guys, I just wanted to pop in. Are you about ready, you think? Or do you need more time?
I think we're ready.
I think we're ready.
Ready? Okay. Okay, I'll give a couple more minutes, all right? Okay. Okay, they were about ready, so I'm gonna give everybody a message that will come back. There we go. Yeah, and then the other thing, I don't know, you probably are seeing it at the high school too. I've just got students with, some mental health kind of concerns, some really big ones that are very scary, and it's just so hard, like, even though, like I said about elementary kids and how you check in with them every day, like at least seeing my students twice a week, I have that as well, right, at the college level. And now I only see them, once a week. And it's.
And the screen is different. It's
Yes.
not, you can't tell.
Well, and I support, I don't make them all turn their cameras on because
that's a bad practice.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which, we're all learning those kinds of things, right? When we did last spring, I was making them turn their cameras on because I'm like, I can't teach you guys if I can't see you. And then when I started reading stuff, I went, oh, that makes perfect sense. I don't know why I didn't think about it.
Yeah,
but-
I even was listening to a teacher podcast the other day, and their teachers in Denver, and he was talking about one of his Muslim students she doesn't like to turn her camera on because when she's home, she doesn't have her hijab on.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And she just expressed how uncomfortable it is even to put it on in her home.
Yes.
Because it's like her only place. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh my God, I would never have.
Right.
I would
That's a
never
really
have
good
thought of that
point.
one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all crazy.
I know.
The masks limit too. I have a really hard time reading engagement when you see this much.
Well, and we've actually had to do some policing with the mask. Like I've had some students who just, seem to need constant reminders, so it's,
Yeah.
you wouldn't think you need that with adults, but. there we
That's
are.
what my kids are pretty good about it.
Yeah.
But I figured they would be better than grown-ups.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're all back, right? Oh, wait, no, we still have a few more. Hold on. I think, no, wait. Yeah, Rachel and Chrissy, you're not back yet, right? No, we still have Rachel and Chrissy. Okay. They have 12 more seconds.
If you're scrambling in your days, you're just fumbling and scrambling, it just sets you up for disaster because that's when you lose control of the classroom. So been there, done that. My first couple of years, it was, I paid the price. So.
Okay, welcome back to everybody. We'll just open it up. So anybody, from your group, whoever wants to, ask away.
Yeah, I was wondering, Bridget, how on earth you can learn 200 names every year. I have 48 kids and I've known them almost all since they were born, and I can't get them straight, from day to
Yeah, I don't know either. I think it's one of those that's helping prevent Alzheimer's. They say you're supposed to do crossword puzzles to help prevent dementia and Alzheimer's. It's not easy, especially like I said, this year's been extra challenging. I don't have my mask by me, but like this much of their face and then you have this much. But I just practice and I tell them, sorry if I say your, like call you the wrong name, but I'm practicing your name. And I do get it wrong initially, but and I'm spending 2 hours a day with them. So I just keep saying, and I tell them it's going to be really awkward. And this is going to look really awkward right now, probably, but I like prolonged look at them when I first say their name. So like, hi, Melanie. And I say, I'm just learning your face with your name. I don't know. It's a lot. And then you see students you've had a couple years ago and they are like, hi, Miss Paddock. And you're like, hi, how are you? Maybe their name is in my head or it is just flown away. I don't have a special trick. I just like say them over and over again.
So I'll
That's
say
how I
my
know them.
trick, Chris, for college students, because I mean, I only usually see you, like this class is really tough because I barely, see you like 5 times, right? But my other classes where I see them like twice a week, I do take their picture and I study their pictures and their names in between class. And usually I can get them all down then by, the second week. But I have to literally, it's like flashcards basically. And I literally look at, and the students, when I tell them, I usually send out a thing before the first day that say, listen, I am going to take your picture. I want them like, because some of them are like, oh my gosh, you should have told me, and it's funny because sometimes they come all, dressed up and everything. I'm like, really, this is just for me. I'm not putting it anywhere else and all this stuff. But that is a trick I use.
And I actually, in the Billings School District, we have Power School, and you can take roll with their pictures, and that actually does not help me learn their name. It actually just lets me cheat and not figure out who the kid is. So I make myself like live learn their names. So I found that using pictures for me actually inhibits, but it's just whatever. I don't know. How do you learn and memorize anything? Mine is just reading it over and over again and messing up. I mess up regularly.
So I have a question. So in my group, we kind of talk about like how can I say? So I have never been in a public school classroom, but recently I taught a couple lessons at St. Francis. And I realized the students are really, really good. The teacher who took me in is also like first year of teaching after so many years of doing other administration stuff or management stuff. So the teacher is fairly new to the students too, and the students just like really good, always listening, engaging, participating, and listening. Even though when I went in the first time, they're really respectful to me and really engaging to what I'm trying to teach them. And so we were just wondering, like, if since they're in a private school and the parents have to pay to send them there, do you think that makes a difference? Because like in terms of, like the parents have to pay the tuition. Do you think that is connected to higher parenting expectation or like, all that connected?
Yeah, I can address that. Partly from my own experience as a student. I actually went to private school. And I would say that my friends and I's behavior was not all that great all the time.
Oh.
In fact, there was this kind of sense of privilege at times. Sort of like, you know, my parents paid for me to be here, so you got to do what I said. I mean, I never did that, right? But there was that from some students. So I don't think what you're experiencing is linked to socioeconomic status or parenting. I am going to say that your teacher that you're with is really great at setting up a good classroom culture and the
Well,
expectations.
she's amazing.
So, I mean, it isn't to say there's some years that it's easier than others. I'll grant you that. Like there are some years where, you know, I'm setting up the classroom culture that first month and it's like butter. And within the first week, we're like a well-oiled machine. Like it's amazing. And then there's other years where all year long, every once in a while, I'm having to stop and go, okay, folks, we're all going to practice this, right? Because we've kind of forgotten how to listen or how to be respectful or something like that. But generally, if you're walking into a classroom like you are, where you're a brand new guest in that classroom and that's what you're noticing, that is really hard work on the teacher's part to get it to the point where it just looks like, oh, this happens naturally. So that would be my opinion. I don't know what you think, Bridget.
I would 100% agree. And I just per experience, and right now I am teaching just AP and college and or college classes. So those students are electing to be there, but that also, like, honors kids does not equal like great behavior all the time. They react and act out in different ways. That, like, for the most part, yes, they're better. Especially mine are older. And I have a discussion with mine pretty regularly. Like, by the time you're a junior in high school, I expect that you know how you best learn. And if you haven't figured out by now what appropriate behavior is in a classroom, that's part of those establishing norms that we do together as well at the high school level that Melanie talked about at the lower. But that takes, with any level, regular reminders. And sometimes you're going to get a class, especially if it's like heavy on the boys. If there's a class that's more boys than girls, this is not true the other way. If it's more girls than boys, you're fine. But if you have more boys than girls in a class, they're going to be naughty. Because I don't know what happens. Too much stuff going on. Teenage boys, and I assume this is true of younger kids as well, can't have that many boys together, and they'll be bad as well. We've also seen this year, our freshmen are having a really rough transition back into in-person learning out of last spring's quarantine. And what proper, and it's like what expected behavior it looks like and what appropriate behavior looks like. Our freshman teachers have had to do lots of reminding of, like, school doesn't actually look like this.
That's a great question. Okay, give us another one.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chiwa.
So, for my K2 question, and I think this could apply to any grade too, because I teach K through 8, and I've kind of experienced this everywhere, but I did experience it the most at the K2 level. And it's kind of the little behavior things, not the big things. So on my teacher evaluation last year, my principal said I need to work on engagement because students' eyes weren't on me, and little things like that, because I think sometimes I can just be so focused on what I'm saying and what I'm trying to get across that if students' eyes are down and they're doodling on their page, I'm sympathizing with them because I was that student that could fidget and still be listening. But what's a strategy that works besides, like, hey, eyes up here, that can increase that engagement with younger kids or kids of any age, really?
So I'm gonna say something you said just a second ago. Like I was that kid that could be doodling and paying attention. Um, Engagement doesn't always mean eyes are on you. That's really important. And it's a little unfortunate, maybe, that your principal thinks that that is the only measure of engagement. And I actually had a very similar observation when I was a kindergarten teacher. We had a brand new principal who had been a vice principal at the middle school and high school level. And this was his first experience at the elementary level. And it was like, early October. So it was early in the year. He came in to do an observation. And at kindergarten, I talk about it like windows, like you have these little windows of moments where they're like full on, right? But those windows are very short, and the other times they are there with you, but you don't always know they're right there with you, you know. So at the end, when we did our debriefing, really his only critique was that, you didn't have all the students looking at you all the time. And I'm just like, so you want to come in and teach a bunch of 5-year-olds, and we'll talk about what that actually looks like. So I think that's one thing to know for yourself. But if you are like, usually you can sense if you've lost student engagement. Okay, so I think that's the most important thing here, is if you are feeling like students are not attending and engaging with what you're doing, then we definitely want to think about what are some strategies where you can get that back. For me, I actually don't agree with the idea that young children can't have long attention spans. They can have very long attention spans when it's something they really care about. So, for example, my students, kindergarten students, when we would start out the year, we would do writing workshop for like 5 minutes of writing. Okay. But by the end of the year, we were doing 45 minutes of writing, and they were engaged the whole time. And at the end of writing, they'd be like, no, I have another book to make. They stayed engaged. So part of it is help students find their entry point into what you are doing, right? So if a kid is really into princesses, is there a way that we can somehow, right, bring in some of their interests into what you're doing? So that's one of the things to do is, and you have to know your students in order to do that, right? So I had like a little list. I had the kids' names, and I had little things, princess or astronauts or horses or, their pet, dog Marley or whatever. And I would intentionally glance down at that list. I mean, it sounds like a little cheat sheet, right? But I would glance down at it and think, who can I tie in here? And especially if you notice it's happening with an individual student pretty regularly. Then you're going to really be intentional for that student to try to bring them into the learning through their interest. I call those an entry point kind of into the learning. So that's important. The other thing is, do mix up what you're doing, right? It's not about attention span, but nobody wants to sit there for 20 minutes. So I do a lot of interactive talking. So the first thing I teach my students is buddy talk. So if we're on the carpet doing a story, I teach them the first day of school, when I'm reading the story, I'm going to stop and ask you to talk to your buddy, and this is what it looks like, right? And I actually teach them how to turn their bodies and talk to one another, and then how to turn back and look at me when it's time. And so working in time for them to talk to each other, because that's sort of like, for PE now, they teach you not to do games where kids are standing there the whole time, right? But that games where the kids are all moving at the same time. This is the same thing. We want all our kids' brains engaged at the same time. And when you require them all to talk to each other, all their brains are working during that time. They can't really check out, or else their partner's not going to have somebody to talk to. So turn and talk is really great. Get up and move. So sometimes I'll go, okay, we need to do this. So everybody's going to stand up at their table and do this, right? So kind of working in some kinesthetic movement with that. And with those kind of things, you can still stay focused in what you're doing, just kind of changing up that activity a little bit. So it's not one single thing the whole time. Bridget, do you have something to add there?
Yeah, I'll add, really similar. And I would say that right now with 2-hour blocks, you have to, just by 2 hours for anyone of any age would be a really long time. Like and we have some teachers doing this, and I am not one of them, gonna lecture for 2 hours, which sounds absolutely, as the teacher, sounds awful.
Oh,
And
yeah.
as the student, sounds awful. I have no desire to lecture for even like 20 minutes. So breaking it up, I even have built-in breaks. So like I always have a daily agenda on the board, 1 through whatever, 1 through 4, 5, 6. I never get through all of it. I have yet to get through a whole agenda, but that's okay. I also, just a small thing, like if I'm standing up at the front of the room, that means that I'm gonna talk, and that like I'm ready for them to pay attention. So that's kind of just a conditioning thing. Like if I'm standing right here, and that's kind of what Melanie just talked about, this is my spot where I'm gonna talk to you right now. So eyes on me. I move around a lot in my classroom, even I just have my mask on all the time, and move around, because if you get close to another human, that like instantly makes them pay attention.
Yeah, that proximity, right? Where you know, the kid that's kind of drifting off, you don't even have to call their name. You can just walk near them and usually they'll come back to you.
Yeah.
I'll add another one too. Being very specific about what the goal is of what you're doing. Sometimes kids actually don't know what you're expecting them to get out of what you're doing. So if I write on the board, goal number 1, by the end of this read aloud or whatever it is I'm doing, you will be able to make 1 prediction, right? And all throughout that lesson, I'm reminding them, remember our goal is that you're able to make 1 prediction at the end. It really helps them then stay engaged because they're like, I know exactly what I'm supposed to be focused on right now. So if you're vague about what the purpose is and what you're doing, then they will kind of be like, I don't know that I really need to engage because I don't know what I'm engaging in. So that's another, I guess, trick to do. Awesome. Loved it. Okay. Another one. Oh, come on, folks.
Yeah, I can talk about some interesting insights that I've had this year while you think of questions. Things that I had never thought of with masks. The eyes are not the window to the soul. This is. Seeing, as you talk, Chantel, about student engagement, we get and we read student engagement hugely, and I'm gonna make up a percentage, but I don't actually know this, so don't quote me. 85% of student engagement I read right here. And masks really inhibit that. So that's fun. I have to actually like try out new strategies now where I'm like, give me a thumbs up if you understand what I'm saying. Because I can't see anything right here. It's been an interesting struggle. I also can't hear necessarily who said something. Like I know someone said something, but you can't see their mouth move, and they all sound a little muffled. So I have to sometimes ask who just said that, which I would normally not have to do. So I just don't really like that. As the teacher, and I read a lot to my 11th and 12th graders, it's really hard to read for extended periods of time with a mask on. But that is what it is, I guess. I don't really have a solution. But really seeing student engagement with only seeing a third of their face is really the hardest part about having the masks on for me all the time, which also means that they can't see my face. And what are they losing by not being able to see my facial expressions, except for like right here?
Hey, Taylor, I just noticed, were you the only one in the middle school group? I'm sorry. I just noticed it. I glanced over to the rooms and I'm like, oh my gosh, Taylor was by himself. Okay, Taylor, you got to have a middle school question.
No, I mean, I don't have a question, but I did a lot of reflecting. So when I started like my teaching path, I was definitely aimed for like lower elementary, right? Last year when I started as a 6th grade teacher, the admin staff told me kind of like the purpose of like classroom management or behavioral management, and it just like kind of stuck with me. They said that the purpose of everything is creating like a safe space for like learning, for like equitable learning. So I just really thought about like that's the purpose of all of this, is like I'm creating a safe space so that my students can learn. So I just reflected on that. I
love that. Do you have a practical way you do that so far, especially with all your online stuff that you're doing?
I like my philosophy of teaching is definitely like collaboration and transparency. So like a lot of like transparency, like this is what we are doing, this is why we are doing it. And then a lot of feedback. So every lesson I do, I always ask students, how do they feel about that? How did you feel about like others and stuff like that? So it's just a lot of transparency, especially for this year.
Yeah.
I think that's also, Taylor, giving them voice, which helps build that safe space. Like if you give students, and I don't care if they're kindergartners or 12th graders or 6th, 7th, 8th, if you let them have a say in their classroom, they're going to be so much more invested in you, in your class. It's huge. And modeling, like I regularly model messing up. But I also like own that. I was telling Melanie while you guys were in breakout that I have a 2nd period AP Lang class on this week that has 23 students. And on next week, on my B week, I have a 5th period AP Lang class that is at the exact same time of day as the other one, and it has 22 students. I have a really hard time differentiating which class is which with my brain. So I've had to start writing down exactly what I actually did in class. But I have modeled and just asked for grace from them. Because that's like, we mess up all the time. So you might as well not play it off and like blame it on them. Like, Miss Paddock, you did not teach us that yet. And I was like, that's probably true.
Oh, that's awesome. I know when my son was in middle school, I had a chat with the principal there, and he's like, you know, our goal at middle school is just that they don't go backwards, that we keep them safe emotionally and physically, right? And that they maybe learn a little bit something, you know, in these years that they're here. But I think it's the same, sounds like, Taylor, what your administration say to you, like, this is the most important thing, is that these kids have a safe space to come and be and engage with each other and with you. So that's cool. Okay, K-12 people, I know we heard from Chris about names. What else did you talk about?
We talked about the pandemic a lot and how it's affecting us in our different areas. And I'm going to have to plug in. I think my...
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so we just kind of compared what's happening in our different areas and commiserated on how difficult it is to have to wear the masks all day and do online school. And some of us are doing both online and in class at the same time.
Yeah.
And yeah, so just like how our districts are managing sports and the different rotations of classes and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I think that opportunity for you all to talk about that was super valuable, right? As far as like, and I think that's something to take away management wise too, because sometimes students have something more pressing than maybe the lesson you have planned. Right? Not that that was what was happening here. I mean, it was very open, but I'm just saying, like, sometimes you really need to recognize that, you know, that, okay, I had planned to do this science lesson or this language arts lesson, but they are all just, I can tell something's happening, right? Like something happened at recess, you know, when I'm thinking elementary, or something's just happening in the world. I mean, right now with the pandemic, I just had the opportunity to be an interviewer for an elementary school here in town. They have outside people interview their kids who want to be on their leadership team for the school. And it was kind of fun. And one of the questions we asked them is, you know, why do you want to be a leader at your school? And several of the students were focused on, so I can help little kids with their masks, you know, so I can help kids with social distancing because sometimes they have a hard time. And I thought, wow, if a year ago I would have been on this interview panel and asked this question, right, those answers would have been so different. But it's important that that's what's on their minds, and that's what's happening right now with them. One thing I'll say to shoot for that I always found fun was teaching my students how to interact with a guest who comes into the classroom. And especially if that guest was going to come up and ask them what they're learning. So it's really fun because we would actually role play and practice. These were younger kids, right? How to actually, you know, so the principal comes up and sits beside them and says, what are you learning right now? They actually know how to walk the principal through what's happening, right? And I think, you know, Chantel, this leads to the thinking with the engagement piece, right? That them knowing what's going on. And it was one of my favorite things once they learned how to do it. I would seek out people to come in the classroom. I'm like, could you just come to my classroom for 15 minutes? You know, go around, sit next to kids and, you know, talk to them and ask them what they're learning. And the kids loved it. They felt really empowered to be able to say to them, like, you know, we always had these goal books that they kept goals in. And they would get out these goals and say, okay, like, here's my goal for writing, right? I'm trying to use capital letters at the beginning of a sentence. And then they would show the person their writing that they're working on and how they used a capital letter. Like, it was so empowering to the students to be able to be articulate about their own learning. And you can do it with 5-year-olds up through high school, right? That they're able to articulate what exactly is going on and why. Yeah, so that's kind of fun.
I would add, I teach mine how to do school without me there. So with a sub. And yesterday was the first day that I had been gone, but today we kind of debriefed about how it went, and it was just fine and really good. I had a sub that's one of my regular subs, and my experiment with me being on with digital stuff worked. But yeah, it was a win.
That's exciting.
But but I make sure they know what my plan is, because you can always get a sub too and I've had subs who like tell them to do the wrong thing. And I've given them full permission to tell the sub that they know what they're doing. And that this is, so I post my exact same sub plan for my students in Google Classroom as I give to the sub. And it's on my board because I'm a control freak. So it's just everywhere.
And with younger kids, it's pretty, they, like I said, they love their routines. And basically my goal in the first month is to get it to where they could pretty much run the class, right? Without me. They know the routine of workshop time. They know the routine of math centers and all these kinds of things. And I'd have student helpers, right, who help get everything out so they can do all that when I'm not there. And they're pretty out of it with subs. And so every once in a while in elementary, you get a sub who just kind of wants to do their own thing, right? Instead of do like what you had planned. And the students really have a hard time with that. I had to actually, like, this one year I had a group of students who just, if it was out of the routine, they were not going to have it. And so I actually had to teach them. I made a little card for a picture card for our schedule that said go with the flow. And so the first thing on the sub, as I said, you need to put the go with the flow sign up, because that will cue them in that it's okay if it's going to be a little different than their normal day.
But it's also awesome that they wanted it. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of okay that they were like, no, that's not what we're supposed to do.
That's cool. Did anybody have questions about, I think this is one that often doesn't get asked, but kind of, fits with what we're talking about tonight, as far as like being a mandatory reporter and kind of like aspects of that play into students' behaviors and things that happen. Does anybody have a question around that?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment on what my school has for a policy for this across the board for all teachers. And it's pretty strict, but I think overall for someone like me that's a younger teacher and still figuring things out, it's been really helpful to have kind of a guideline. I was telling my breakout room, we have a whole spreadsheet. So a committee of teachers created this whole spreadsheet with administrative approval, of course, but listing like every behavior you can think of that can come across for a kid. And then like first occurrence, second occurrence, what you need to do. And so just about all of them, we try and require some type of parent contact, whether it's just an email, but we also use like a Google form that gets sent to our behavioral specialist and the principal too. And it really just helps me, I guess, have a structure instead of having to create my own. And then also having kids experience different little islands of management between their specials teachers like myself and their classroom teachers.
Yeah.
Because before that, my previous principal didn't have anything like this. And that's where we'd experienced the problems, is like across teachers saying my student's getting away with this, but not in another room or something.
Yeah.
So
that sounds awesome. I love that.
We're also a small school. We only have 150 kids.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes a difference either, but.
One school is that we also, in our faculty meetings, we regularly had the list of all kids in the schools, and we spent like half an hour with those lists. And as a group, talking about any students who, might be falling through the cracks per se, or, because sometimes, like you said, maybe the classroom teacher is aware of something, but when they go to music, the music teacher isn't aware that they're dealing with something, or vice versa. Sometimes students tell their specialist teachers things that they don't tell their classroom teachers. And so we found that to be really helpful, to have these common conversations about the actual students that were in our school. And we were, that school is like about 400 students. So we were able to do it in half an hour at a faculty meeting. And we did that usually a couple times a month. So. I just know one thing I've learned is if you ever have a doubt whether you should report something, you should report it. You never know what other reports that have been made, and that even though this might seem kind of minor, it might be the one thing that child needs to find a more safe place to be, kind of a thing. So I always just erred on that. Like if I ever have a question, I'm just going to go ahead and report it. So, yeah. How about, I know Bridget and I were talking about this earlier. Here at the college, I am noticing an increase in some mental health issues for students. And I can't imagine that I'm sure it's happening, in the K-12 as well. Are there any experiences or things you all are doing to help students in that area that you're finding successful?
Well, I have been having regular conversations with mine about what's working, what's not working, questions they have. And to be honest, and I tell them this, I don't know a lot of answers. That going back to like at this point right now, I think. But I have also told them, and I mean this, that I will share any information that we get with them. We do have an increasing number of kids going on to quarantine, like increasing by the day. So lots of them have questions like, what is that going to look like for if I go on quarantine? Are we going to close? So I've just had really open conversations with them. I know personally, I want to know. I want to know information, and I am better mentally if I'm getting information, or if I even know where I'm going to get my information. So I've been trying. I don't have any information to give them really right now, but I am giving them whatever information I can.
Yeah. Yeah. Thus, we may not be having spring break, everybody.
For our 7-12 kids, we have a dedicated 20 minutes a day for social emotional learning for them. So that's a breakout that we have, because we as a staff have decided that is just as important at the 7-12 level as it is at the K6 level. And so, like last week we talked about 21 qualities to be a good citizen, and it talked about like in technology information and social media information and those things. On Tuesday, it was what are some positives of this school year? And my 7th graders made a poster that we put up in the room because I supervise the 7th graders for study hall and social emotional. So we did a poster of our positives from this year. There couldn't be any negative talk. So it was one time where we shut that off. And so we've created different things so that they have that social emotional outlet. But like Bridget said, being just transparent with them about the information that we have and the unknowns and in those things to make sure that they know that door is open.
What I love about that, Sarah, is that you're teaching them strategies they could use on their own as well, right? So even this idea of like, for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to list a bunch of positive things, right? So not only are you actively helping them in that moment collectively together, but I would take that extra step and be intentional about saying, hey, listen, if you found this useful today, this is something you can do on your own. If you're feeling down or it's difficult, just even if it's 5 minutes, right? Like take this little bit of time and do this kind of a thing. Love that. Cool. You guys have been really easy on us. Come on. Like we're like, bring it on, bring the hard questions.
I got a question. It's probably not so hard, but it goes back to something that Bridget brought up earlier about having classes that are majority male. I grew up in a town, and I went to a high school town where there were a bunch of private schools, and they were all monogendered. So I was wondering what you thought about that, because a lot of people say, oh, that's great because it reduces those intersex distractions.
I think that there are probably pros and cons to it. So I also think that, and having like one of my co-chair for our department taught in Memphis at an all-girls school. Sometimes whatever because boys and girls do act differently, for better or for worse. Typically, they just have different behaviors that are I'm gonna just use air quotes, normal. So sometimes those all just get exacerbated, and they elevate each other's behaviors. I think other times it's probably a really positive thing, but I think it's probably also just 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
It's definitely, I would call it at the elementary level when I've experienced that, because I've had classes that I have more boys than girls. I came to understand it as a different sort of energy. So it wasn't that they were being naughty per se. it's just a different energy that's there. Yeah. And you have to respond differently than to that energy. And the other thing that when I had that was interesting is the girls get lost. And I think that's really important to understand, is that because there's this like bigger, it's like a bigger energy, I want to say, right? Because there's like this bigger energy, students who have a lower energy can very easily just kind of sink into the background. And that can be boys or girls. I've had boys who have that lower energy as well. And so I think it's just being more aware of what you need to do in response to the kinds of energy that you're receiving from the students. And I worked with a second grade reading group one time that was all girls except for one boy. And that was a very different energy as well. And it was one of probably the most challenging small group experiences that I had teaching like literacy intervention. And we had to do some classroom, like come up with our own expectations for our group. There was a lot of kind of cattiness between the girls, and then they would kind of pick on the boy. Like it was pretty major, and we just had to kind of shut it down right away. But it took us probably, a good couple weeks of meeting. I'd meet with these kids every day at a certain time. We would have to spend a good 10 to 15 minutes at the beginning of our session having this social emotional like expectation time. Once we kind of had these discussions, it was all out in the open, and we co-created what those expectations were. We were able to kind of get on with it, but it definitely was always different than other small group experiences that I was used to doing. So I don't know if that helps, Kyle. I think the most important thing, one of my favorite books I absolutely love, talks about teaching as improvisation. And this idea of the metaphor that we're actors and that we're on stage and that we are improvising. We make plans. We plan the heck. I mean, Bridget was just telling about, here I'm doing my plan books this way because I've got to, account for this. So we definitely plan, but a lot of what we do is be proactively responsive, if that makes sense. Like knowing kind of where you could go with something if it's starting to go a certain way, but also sometimes when it just goes away you weren't expecting, kind of like, okay, in the moment, what do we do with that? And I think as new teachers, that's one of the most important things to pay attention to when you're reflecting. Kind of like, how did I respond when that went on, right? If this were to happen again, what's some practical things I would do to respond maybe in a more, a more productive way? And the longer you teach, you build up that little repertoire of ways of improvising. So I think about if you watch, what's that TV show where there's like 4 actors and they improvise? Shoot, I can't remember the name of it, but they kind of give them, a scene to play out, and they get up.
Whose line is it anyway?
Yeah, that's it. Whose line is it anyway? Okay. So on that, if you watch that show long enough, you will recognize patterns of how they improvise, right? And I would say that's the same for a teacher, right? You will develop these patterns of improvisation. And then every once in a while, a real Lulu will come out and make you go like, okay, what do I do with this? Kind of a thing. I also say, don't ever be afraid to just stop everything and just go, okay, hold on, folks. This was not where I thought it would go, or this is not working, right? Like, I mean, I've done that at college classes as well, where I just go, wait a minute, like, this is not how I envisioned this going. It's going a direction that's not going to be helpful for us. So let's regroup. Let's think about where we could go. Like, always be willing to just do that. Like, don't feel like you're a failure if you do that. You'd be more of a failure if you didn't stop and kind of regroup and be responsive.
Yeah, I think I used the words, we're gonna take a hard right turn now. That was my redirect. And I think along those lines, as I said, I have an agenda on my board every day. I never get through my agenda every day, and I am okay with that. I am an over planner. I would rather have too much. I just move it to the next day. Or if I tried something out in one class and then I feel really bad that I made them do that, like read George Washington's inaugural address, which you should not ever do to a student. Just because you did it with one class does not mean you need to inflict that torture on anyone else throughout the day, or yourself more throughout the day. So that flexibility, more than anything, that's flexibility and being gracious with yourself. We need to change things. And if you aren't willing to change, like if you say, nope, we read that speech in that class, so everybody else is gonna read it, and you'll be like, you're just gonna hate yourself more than anything.
At the high school level, kids figure that out too. I remember working on a schedule with my son one year for high school, and he was purposely picking classes that were the second session, right? Or the second time the teacher was teaching that group, because he's like, because I know that she'll figure that out in the first class and it'll be much better by this class. I'm like, oh, well, my gosh.
Really wise. That's really extra wise. But it's really true. They say the first time you teach it, it's going to be like, maybe you'll be okay. And the second time you teach it, like, that's when you got it. Like, it's still fresh enough that you're excited about it, but you've also like had your trial run.
Yeah.
And then after that, you're like, I've already done this, but it's still a new class. So it's still a different discussion for me, at least. Like my kids. Yeah. We're already done with that. It took us an hour to get that done in the last class.
And as poor elementary teachers, you have to wait a whole year.
Sorry, I did that to you. I will not do that to next.
I'm not doing that next year. And you have to have some way that you're keeping those notes somewhere, because you will forget. Like, you think you won't forget. I've done it. And then the next year I'm teaching and I go, oh my gosh, this is exactly what happened last year. Now I remember, right?
Yeah. Did I not change that? No, I didn't.
Cool. Okay, well, no sense keeping you all here beyond time if you don't have any other questions. Last call. Any other questions?
I will answer almost any question.
Yep.
I'm also working on qualifiers this year, so almost any.
Almost. I like it. I need to learn that more.
Yeah. And practicing.
Yeah.
At this point in time, right now, I think.
I was teaching a class in China, and I said to them, like, I'll answer any question. Woo, I got some really personal questions.
You will not, and no.
Like,
nope, I will answer.
I can answer that question. Okay, well, thank you, Bridget, so much for being with us. Really appreciate it very much. And before we go, I want to make sure I answer any questions about the Choose Your Own Adventure online learning part for some of you. If you are a class 5 teacher and you're already, or an internship and you're teaching in your own classroom, you don't need to do that part. So it's only people who have placements that would need to do that part. Is there any questions about that? Feeling okay? Okay. All right. Well, if you
Melanie?
Yeah, go ahead.
I couldn't get my microphone to turn back
Okay.
on. Will you repeat what you were saying at the beginning about not sharing the fact that we're in our classroom more than 30 hours?
Okay. So yeah. Hold on. I'm just gonna.